grateful for your continued support. Quick question for our viewers. Which country or city are you watching from? We love knowing how far these stories reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Homecoming. The static crackled through the radio, disrupting the relative peace of the military base. Sergeant Grant Hughes stood at attention, his muscles tense as his commanding officer's voice filled the room. The words that followed would change his life forever. Sergeant Hughes, I regret to inform you that due to the extent of your injuries sustained in the IED incident, you are being honorably discharged from service. Colonel Matthews' voice carried a mix of respect and sympathy. Grant's left hand instinctively moved to his ear, where silence had become his constant companion. The IED explosion had taken more than just his hearing on one side. It had stolen his future. 15 years of service, countless missions, and brotherhood forged in combat, all ending with a few formal words over a radio. Sir, with all due respect, Grant started to protest, but Colonel Matthews cut him off. This isn't up for discussion, Sergeant. The medical board's decision is final. Your service record speaks for itself, and you should be proud. Your discharge papers will be ready tomorrow morning. Grant's jaw clenched, the muscles in his face tightening as he fought to maintain his composure. Understood, sir. The words tasted bitter in his mouth. Later that night, in his quarters, Grant sat on his bunk, staring at the photos taped to the wall. His wife Lisa's bright smile beamed back at him from their wedding photo. Next to it, a more recent picture showed his son Kevin at his middle school graduation. They were his anchor, his reason to keep going. But the anger still simmered beneath the surface. The trip home was a blur of military transport flights and connecting airports. Grant clutched his duffel bag, containing 15 years of military life compressed into a few cubic feet of space. As he approached his house, he noticed the decorations first, red, white, and blue balloons bobbing in the breeze, and a large "Welcome Home, Sergeant Hughes" banner stretched across the front porch. The front door burst open before he reached it. Lisa ran out, her arms outstretched, tears streaming down her face. She collided with him in a fierce embrace that nearly knocked him off balance. "You're home," she whispered against his chest. "You're finally home." Kevin appeared in the doorway, no longer the little boy from Grant's memories. At 14, he was all gangly limbs and uncertain movements, trying to find his place in the world. He hung back, watching his parents' reunion with a mix of happiness and awkwardness. "Hey, Dad," Kevin said, shuffling his feet. "Did you really get blown up?" "Kevin," Lisa scolded, pulling away from Grant. "We talked about this." Grant laughed, the sound surprising even himself. "It's okay," he said, walking over to ruffle his son's hair. "Yeah, I did. But I'm still here, aren't I?" Inside, the house was transformed into a welcome home celebration. Red, white, and blue streamers hung from the ceiling, and a spread of Grant's favorite foods covered the dining room table. The smell of Lisa's famous pot roast filled the air. "The neighbors helped with the decorations," Lisa explained, watching Grant take it all in. "Everyone's so happy you're home safe." Grant nodded, trying to push down the voice in his head that whispered he wasn't supposed to be home yet. "Not like this." "It looks amazing," he said instead. The next few weeks fell into a routine. Grant threw himself into family life with the same dedication he had given to his military career. He helped Kevin with his algebra homework, discovered his son's newfound interest in basketball, and took Lisa out for date nights at their old favorite restaurants. But there were moments when the facade cracked. Like when he'd wake up at 0500 hours, body tensed for PT formation that would never come. Or when he'd catch Lisa watching him with worried eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. One evening, as Grant sat on the back porch cleaning his personal firearm, old habits die hard, Kevin came out and sat beside him. "Dad." Kevin's voice was hesitant. "Are you mad about having to leave the army?" Grant's hands stilled on the weapon. He looked at his son, seeing the concern in those young eyes. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But being here with you and your mom, that makes it better." Kevin nodded, then said, "I'm glad you're home. Even if it's not how you wanted it to happen." The honesty in his son's words hit Grant hard. He set down the cleaning cloth and pulled Kevin into a one-armed hug. "Me too, buddy. Me too." But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Grant noticed the small things. How Lisa would sometimes step away to take phone calls, her voice dropping to whispers. How she'd changed her phone's password, something she'd never done before. He told himself he was being paranoid, that his military training was making him see threats where none existed. The idea for Hughes Customs came to him during a sleepless night. He'd always loved working on cars, had been the go-to mechanic in his unit. The garage space on the edge of town was available for a reasonable rent, and his savings combined with a small business loan would cover the startup costs. Lisa supported the idea enthusiastically. Perhaps too enthusiastically, he thought later. "It's perfect for you," she said. "You need something to focus on, something that's yours." The business took off quickly. Grant's attention to detail and reputation for honest work brought in a steady stream of customers. He specialized in custom modifications, turning ordinary vehicles into personalized masterpieces. The work gave him purpose, a reason to get up in the morning that didn't involve following orders or dodging bullets. But then came that evening on the back porch. Grant had come home early, planning to surprise Lisa with takeout from her favorite Thai place. Instead, he found her there, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in that soft, intimate tone he remembered from their early dating days. "I miss you too," she was saying. "But we have to be careful. He's not stupid." Grant cleared his throat, and Lisa spun around, nearly dropping her phone. Her face flushed red as she quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" Grant asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Just an old friend," Lisa said quickly. Too quickly. "We were catching up." Grant nodded, pretending to accept her explanation. But that night, as he lay awake beside her sleeping form, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong in his perfect homecoming story. Chapter 2. Shattered Dreams. The hospital waiting room buzzed with fluorescent lights and quiet conversations. Grant sat with his head in his hands, replaying the events that had led them here. Kevin had been feeling tired lately, more than usual for a teenage boy. Then came the unexplained bruising, the constant thirst, the dramatic weight loss. Dr. Sarah Martinez entered the waiting room, her face grave. Grant and Lisa stood up simultaneously, hands automatically reaching for each other despite the recent tension between them. "Mr. and Mrs. Hughes," Dr. Martinez began, gesturing for them to sit. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news about Kevin's condition." The doctor's words seemed to come from far away, as if Grant was hearing them through water. "End-stage renal disease. Kidney failure. Transplant needed." The medical terms blurred together, but the bottom line was clear. Their son was dying. "How much?" Grant interrupted the doctor's explanation. "How much will the transplant cost?" Dr. Martinez hesitated. "With your insurance, you're still looking at significant out-of-pocket expenses. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." Lisa gasped beside him. Grant reached for her hand again, squeezing it tightly. "We'll figure it out," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Kevin was admitted to the hospital that day. Grant stood in the doorway of his son's room, watching as nurses hooked him up to various machines. Kevin looked so small in the hospital bed, his usual teenage bravado stripped away by illness. "Dad." Kevin's voice was weak. "Am I going to die?" Grant crossed the room in 3 strides, sitting on the edge of the bed. "No," he said firmly. "Absolutely not. Your mom and I are going to do everything we can to help you. You just focus on getting stronger, okay?" Kevin nodded, but his eyes were filled with fear. "I'm scared." "I know, buddy." Grant smoothed Kevin's hair back from his forehead. "But you're not alone. I'm right here." The decision to sell Hughes Customs came easily. Grant didn't even hesitate. The business was doing well, and the sale would give them a substantial down payment for Kevin's medical expenses. He announced his decision to Lisa that evening in the hospital cafeteria. "But you love that shop," Lisa protested, pushing her untouched coffee away. "It's your dream." "Kevin is my dream," Grant replied firmly. "The shop is just a building and some tools. I can always rebuild that." "We can't rebuild our son." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of medical tests and paperwork. Grant underwent evaluation after evaluation to determine if he could be a donor for Kevin. He exercised religiously, quit his occasional cigar, did everything the doctors recommended to make himself the best possible candidate. Then came the phone call that changed everything again. "Mr. Hughes?" The transplant coordinator's voice was professional but gentle. "We've received your blood work results. I'm afraid there's been a complication." Grant gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of complication?" "Your blood type. It's incompatible with Kevin's. You're not a match." The words didn't make sense at first. "But I'm his father," Grant said slowly. "How can I not be a match?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Hughes, blood type inheritance follows specific patterns. Based on your blood type and Kevin's, well, it's biologically impossible for you to be his biological father." The phone slipped from Grant's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The coordinator's voice continued to speak from the fallen device, but Grant couldn't hear it over the roaring in his ears. All he could think about was Lisa's secret phone calls, her strange behavior, the way she sometimes looked at Kevin with guilt in her eyes. He picked up the phone mechanically. "Thank you for letting me know," he said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "I still want to proceed with the donation if possible." "Of course, Mr. Hughes. It's still a very generous act, regardless of biological connection. We'll continue with the evaluation process." Grant hung up and sat heavily in his office chair. The truth he just learned threatened to overwhelm him, but he pushed it down. Kevin needed him. Everything else, the lies, the betrayal, the anger, would have to wait. The hospital became their second home. Grant spent his days alternating between Kevin's room and the various medical departments where he underwent his own tests. He watched Lisa interact with their son, searching for signs of her deception in every gesture, every word. Then came the moment that shattered what was left of his world. Grant had gone to get coffee from the hospital cafeteria, taking the long way back to stretch his legs. As he approached Kevin's floor, he heard Lisa's voice coming from an empty waiting area. She was on her phone again, speaking in that same intimate tone he'd heard on the porch. "This fool of a husband is giving up his organ for your child." Lisa's voice was bitter, mocking. "He even sold his company to pay the bills for a kid that's not biologically his." Grant froze, his paper coffee cup crumpling in his grip. Hot liquid spilled over his hand, but he barely felt it. The pain of Lisa's words was far worse than any physical discomfort. He wanted to storm into the waiting area, to confront Lisa with her lies, to demand answers about Kevin's real father. But the image of his son in that hospital bed stopped him. Kevin needed stability right now, needed to focus on getting better. Grant's desire for answers, for revenge, would have to wait. So he stood there, coffee dripping from his clenched fist, and listened as his wife continued to mock his sacrifice to her lover. Each word burned itself into his memory, fuel for the fire of retribution that was beginning to burn in his heart. Finally, Lisa ended her call. Grant waited until he heard her footsteps move away before he emerged from his hiding place. He threw away his ruined coffee and walked back to Kevin's room, his face a mask of calm that betrayed none of the turmoil within. Kevin was asleep when he entered, his face peaceful for the first time in days. Grant sat in the chair beside his bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his son's chest. Biology didn't matter, he decided. Kevin was his son in all the ways that counted, and he would do anything to protect him. But Lisa would pay for her betrayal. Grant began to plan, his military training kicking in as he considered his options. He would be patient. He would gather evidence, build his case. And when the time was right, he would expose everything. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside Kevin's bed, marking time like a metronome. Grant leaned back in his chair, his mind already working through the steps of his revenge. Lisa had no idea what was coming. She'd soon learn that betraying a soldier was a dangerous mistake. For now, though, Grant would play his part. He would be the devoted husband, the loving father, the selfless donor. But beneath that facade, a storm was brewing. And when it broke, it would sweep away everything Lisa had built her lies upon. Kevin stirred in his sleep, mumbling something incoherent. Grant reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "I'm here, buddy," he whispered. "Dad's not going anywhere." And he meant it. No matter what happened with Lisa, no matter what truths came to light, Grant would always be Kevin's father. That was one thing that would never change. Chapter 3. Seeds of Retribution. The kidney donation process moved forward despite the revelation about Kevin's paternity. Grant maintained his composure during the day, playing the role of devoted husband and father perfectly. But at night, while Lisa slept soundly beside him, his mind churned with plans for revenge. One particularly sleepless night, Grant sat in his home office, scrolling through his phone contacts. He paused at a familiar name, Ray Gentry. They'd served together in 2 tours, and Ray had since become a private investigator. Grant's thumb hovered over the call button for a moment before pressing it. Grant Hughes, Ray's gruff voice answered on the 3rd ring. "It's been a while, brother." "Too long," Grant agreed. "Listen, Ray, I need your help with something." Sensitive. There was a pause on the other end. "You still at the same place?" This sounds like a face-to-face conversation. The next afternoon, Ray's weathered pickup truck pulled into Grant's driveway. Lisa was at work, and Kevin had a dialysis appointment with a hospital volunteer, giving them privacy for their discussion. Ray hadn't changed much since their army days, still barrel-chested with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. He sat across from Grant at the kitchen table, listening intently as Grant laid out the situation. "She's been having an affair," Grant explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The worst part? Kevin isn't mine biologically. I found out during the transplant testing." Ray's expression darkened. "Jesus, Grant. That's messed up." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "What do you need from me?" "Everything, Ray. I want to know who he is, how long it's been going on, what else they're hiding." Grant's knuckles whitened as he gripped his coffee mug. "I need proof. Solid, undeniable evidence." "You planning to use it for the divorce?" Grant shook his head slowly. "No, not yet. First, I want to understand the full scope of their betrayal. Then." He let the sentence hang unfinished. Ray studied his old friend's face carefully. "You sure about this? Once we start digging, we might find things you wish you hadn't known." "I need to know the truth, Ray. All of it." Ray nodded, pulling out a small notebook. "All right, tell me everything you've noticed. Phone calls, behavior changes, anything suspicious." For the next hour, Grant detailed Lisa's suspicious activities. The secret phone calls, the changed passwords, the unexplained absences. Ray took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "One more thing," Ray said as he stood to leave. "Don't change your behavior. Act normal. If she suspects we're investigating, she'll be more careful." Grant walked Ray to his truck. "How long do you think this will take?" "Give me a week to start. I'll focus on identifying the other man first." Ray clapped Grant on the shoulder. "We'll figure this out, brother. Just like old times." As Ray's truck disappeared down the street, Grant felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Finally, he was taking action instead of just reacting. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and domestic routines. Grant played his part perfectly, even managing to smile and nod when Lisa made excuses about working late. Meanwhile, Ray's investigation began producing results. "His name is Jeremy Clark," Ray reported during a clandestine meeting in a diner across town. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "He's a professor at the local community college. They've known each other since high school." Grant opened the envelope, examining the surveillance photos inside. They showed Lisa meeting a well-dressed man in various locations: coffee shops, restaurants, a motel on the outskirts of town. The man had an academic look about him, with wire-rimmed glasses and carefully styled hair. "How long?" Grant asked, his voice rough. "From what I've uncovered, the affair's been going on for at least 15 years. Ray paused, letting that sink in. "There's more, Grant. Clark has a second phone, one that only Lisa has the number to. I managed to access some of their text history." Grant's jaw clenched. "Show me." Ray pulled out his tablet, displaying screen captures of text messages. The conversations between Lisa and Jeremy were intimate, filled with inside jokes and plans for future meetings. But what caught Grant's attention were the occasional references to business dealings and special deliveries. "I did some digging into Clark's background," Ray continued. "He's got some interesting financial patterns. Large cash deposits, irregular timing. And there's been some rumors at the college about students getting access to certain substances." Grant's military training kicked in, his mind automatically analyzing the new intelligence. You think they're involved in something illegal? I think there's more to this than just an affair. Ray swiped through more photos on his tablet. Look at this one. That package Lisa's carrying? It came from the pharmaceutical company where she works. The pieces started falling into place in Grant's mind. Lisa's access to pharmaceuticals, Jeremy's position at the college, the suspicious financial transactions. It painted a disturbing picture. We need more evidence, Grant decided. Hard proof of what they're doing. Ray nodded in agreement. I'll keep digging. But Grant, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. If they're really involved in substance distribution, this is serious. We might need to involve the authorities eventually. Not yet, Grant said firmly. I want to understand everything first. How deep this goes, who else is involved. Then we'll decide how to proceed. As Grant drove home that evening, his mind was racing with the new information. The betrayal was worse than he'd imagined. Not just an affair, but potentially criminal activity as well. The anger that had been simmering inside him began to crystallize into something harder, more focused. He pulled into his driveway just as Lisa was leaving for what she claimed was a work dinner. She waved cheerfully as she drove past, completely unaware that her carefully constructed world of lies was beginning to crumble. Inside the house, Grant found Kevin on the couch, looking pale but determined as he worked on his homework. Despite everything, the sight of his son brought a genuine smile to his face. How are you feeling, buddy? Grant asked, sitting beside him. Tired, Kevin admitted. But I finished my math worksheet. Grant examined the completed homework, pride momentarily overshadowing his darker thoughts. This looks good. You're getting better at algebra. Dad. Kevin's voice was hesitant. Are you and Mom okay? You seem different lately. Grant carefully kept his expression neutral. We're just stressed about getting you better. That's all that matters right now. Kevin nodded, but something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Grant pulled him into a one-armed hug, silently vowing to protect him from the storm that was coming. Later that night, Grant sat in his office, examining the evidence Ray had collected. The photos, text messages, and financial records told a story of deception that spanned most of Kevin's life. He opened his laptop and began organizing the information, creating a detailed timeline of Lisa and Jeremy's relationship. As he worked, Grant thought about his next steps. He needed more than just proof of the affair. He needed to understand the full extent of their illegal activities. The soldier in him knew that the best strategy was to gather intelligence before taking action. But the betrayed husband and father wanted immediate revenge. A text from Ray interrupted his thoughts. Found something big. Meeting tomorrow, usual place. Grant replied with a simple acknowledgement, then leaned back in his chair. Outside, crickets chirped in the darkness, a peaceful sound that contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his mind. The seeds of his retribution were planted, and soon they would bear fruit. Lisa and Jeremy had no idea what was coming. He closed his laptop and headed to bed, where he would lie awake for hours, planning his next moves. The military had taught him the importance of patience and strategy. He would use those lessons now, building his case until the perfect moment to strike. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new evidence of betrayal. But for now, Grant allowed himself to feel a grim satisfaction. The truth was coming to light, and with it, the opportunity for justice, or perhaps something darker. The game was on, and Grant Hughes intended to win. Chapter 4. Operation Trojan Horse. Grant sat in his office at home, surrounded by the evidence Ray had gathered about Lisa and Jeremy's illegal activities. The photos and documents painted a disturbing picture, but he needed more, concrete, undeniable proof that would stand up in court. His military training kicked in as he formulated a plan. He needed someone on the inside, someone who could infiltrate Jeremy's operation without raising suspicion. The name Edwin Wilkins came to mind, a young veteran he'd mentored during his last deployment. Grant picked up his phone and dialed. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. Sergeant Hughes? Is that really you? Edwin, Grant said. I need your help with something sensitive. Are you still as good at blending in as you were in the service? Even better now, Edwin replied. What's the mission? Grant explained the situation, the affair, the substance trafficking, the betrayal. Edwin listened without interrupting, only asking questions when Grant finished. "So you need me to go undercover at the college?" Edwin asked. "Yes. Enroll in Jeremy Clark's class, gain his trust. We need solid evidence of his operation. Consider it done, Sergeant. When do we start?" The next day, Grant, Ray, and Edwin met at a quiet diner outside town to plan their strategy. Ray spread out surveillance photos of Jeremy across the table. "From what I've observed," Ray explained, pointing to various images, "Clark targets struggling students, especially those with financial problems. He offers them quick money to distribute substances on campus." Edwin studied the photos intently. "And security? What am I looking at in terms of exposure?" "That's where it gets interesting," Grant said. "Jeremy thinks he's untouchable because of his position. He's careful but not paranoid. His biggest protection is his reputation as a respected professor." "I've got a plan," Edwin said, leaning forward. "I'll pose as a veteran using the GI Bill, struggling with civilian life. It's close enough to truth that I can sell it convincingly." Grant nodded approvingly. "Perfect cover story. You'll be relatable but vulnerable. Exactly the type of student he preys on." They spent hours going over details, Edwin's backstory, emergency protocols, communication methods. Ray provided him with a concealed camera and recording devices disguised as ordinary objects. "Remember," Grant warned, "if anything feels wrong, you pull out immediately. No heroics." "Don't worry, Sergeant," Edwin replied with a confident grin. "I learned from the best." The operation began the following week. Edwin enrolled in Jeremy's sociology class, carefully crafting his persona as a struggling veteran. He arrived early to class, choosing a seat that gave him a clear view of both Jeremy and the other students. Jeremy Clark proved to be a charismatic lecturer, mixing academic theory with personal anecdotes that kept his students engaged. Edwin watched him work the room, noting how he paid special attention to certain students, ones who looked tired, stressed, or wore worn clothes. After class, Edwin approached Jeremy during office hours, playing his role perfectly. "Professor Clark?" Edwin's voice carried just the right mix of respect and uncertainty. "I was wondering if I could talk to you about the assignment. I'm having trouble keeping up with the workload." Jeremy looked up from his desk, studying Edwin with practiced concern. "Of course. Please, sit down. And call me Jeremy. It's just—" Edwin hesitated, then continued, "Between classes and trying to make rent, I'm barely staying afloat. The GI Bill helps, but civilian life is harder than I expected." Jeremy's expression shifted subtly, interest replacing concern. "Many students struggle with similar issues. Sometimes they just need alternative solutions." The conversation continued, Jeremy probing Edwin's situation while maintaining plausible deniability. Edwin played his part perfectly, showing just enough desperation to be convincing without appearing suspicious. Over the next few weeks, Edwin became a regular presence in Jeremy's orbit. He attended study groups, participated in class discussions, and gradually built a reputation as a hard-working but struggling student. The breakthrough came during a late-night study session. Jeremy kept Edwin behind after the others left, closing his office door. "Edwin, I might have an opportunity for you," Jeremy said, his voice low. "A way to earn extra money. But it requires discretion." "I'm listening," Edwin replied, his concealed recording device capturing moment. Jeremy outlined the basics of his operation, careful to use euphemisms and indirect language. But the meaning was clear. He wanted Edwin to join his network of student dealers. That night, Edwin met with Grant and Ray to review the recording. "It's a start," Ray said, "but we need more. Actual evidence of transactions, proof of Lisa's involvement." "I'm gaining his trust," Edwin assured them. "He's starting to let his guard down." Grant nodded, but concern lined his face. "Be careful. The closer you get, the more dangerous it becomes." The operation continued, with Edwin slowly working his way deeper into Jeremy's confidence. He documented everything: conversations, meetings, the names of other student dealers. But the most valuable intelligence came from an unexpected source. One evening, after class, Edwin noticed a young woman crying in the hallway. He recognized her as Brittany Mercado, one of Jeremy's regular students. "Hey," he said softly, offering her a tissue. Are you okay? Brittany looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. I never wanted to be part of this. Edwin sat beside her, maintaining his cover while gently encouraging her to talk. Brittany poured out her story, how Jeremy had recruited her, promised easy money, then trapped her in his web of distribution and dependency. I want out, she said finally, but I'm scared of what he'll do. Edwin saw an opportunity. What if I told you there might be a way? People who could help. Brittany's eyes widened with hope and fear. Who? Let me make some calls, Edwin said. But you have to be sure. This would mean telling everything you know. Brittany wiped her eyes, straightening her shoulders. I'm sure. I'll tell everything. Edwin immediately reported this development to Grant and Ray. Brittany's testimony could be the key to bringing down Jeremy's entire operation. Set up a meeting, Grant decided. Somewhere safe, away from campus. The meeting took place at a small coffee shop in the next town. Brittany provided detailed information about Jeremy's operation, names, dates, locations. She even had text messages and photos stored on her phone. Lisa, Mrs. Hughes, she brings the supplies, Brittany explained. Always in these white paper bags from the pharmacy where she works. Jeremy distributes them to us during study sessions. Grant's hands clenched under the table at the mention of Lisa's involvement, but his voice remained steady. You're doing the right thing, Brittany. We'll make sure you're protected. As they left the coffee shop, Edwin noticed Kevin waiting in Grant's car. The teenager had been spending time at the college, catching up on schoolwork he'd missed during his illness. Want me to help him with his homework? Edwin offered, surprising himself with how much he'd come to care about Grant's son. That would be great, Grant replied. He likes you, you know. Says you explain things better than his regular teachers. Edwin felt a twinge of guilt. He'd grown genuinely fond of Kevin, and the thought of his undercover work potentially hurting the boy troubled him. Later that week, after helping Kevin with his calculus homework, Edwin pulled Grant aside. Sir, I need to tell you something, he said, voice tight with emotion. I'm getting too attached to Kevin. He's like the little brother I never had. Sometimes it feels like I'm betraying him by being part of this deception. Grant placed a hand on Edwin's shoulder. This is dangerous work, son. I understand how you feel, but we can't let emotions cloud our judgment. We're doing this to protect Kevin and other kids like him. Edwin nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir. I'll stay focused. But as he drove home that night, Edwin couldn't shake the feeling that the operation was becoming more complicated than any of them had anticipated. The lines between deception and genuine connection were blurring, and he wondered how many more lives would be affected before it was over. Chapter 5. The Net Titans. The evidence against Jeremy and Lisa mounted steadily over the following weeks. Edwin's recordings, Brittany's testimony, and Ray's surveillance had created a comprehensive picture of their operation. Grant knew it was time to involve higher authorities. He reached out to Special Agent Sarah Martinez, an FBI contact from his military days. They met in a secure location, where Grant presented the evidence they'd gathered. Christ, Grant, Sarah exclaimed, reviewing the files. This is bigger than I expected. Clark's using his position to create a distribution network right under the college's nose. And my wife, Grant added grimly, is using her pharmacy access to supply the substances. Sarah's expression hardened. That guy is a menace. Not to worry, Sergeant Hughes, we're on it. We'll need to plan this carefully. One shot at taking them down clean. They spent hours strategizing. The upcoming town fair provided an ideal opportunity, a public venue with multiple access points and plenty of surveillance opportunities. We'll have undercover agents throughout the crowd, Sarah explained, marking positions on a map. When we confirm a transaction, we move in. Grant studied the fair layout. What about backup plans? If something goes wrong? Always thinking like a soldier, Sarah smiled. Don't worry, we've got contingencies. The day of the fair arrived bright and clear. Grant watched from a predetermined position as families streamed through the entrance, unaware of the operation about to unfold. Edwin was in position near Jeremy's usual meeting spot, wearing a wire and mingling with other students. Ray monitored the perimeter, coordinating with FBI surveillance teams. Grant's earpiece crackled with activity as agents reported in. Target spotted entering the east gate. Subject 2 confirmed, moving to position Alpha. Through his binoculars, Grant observed Jeremy and Lisa working the crowd. They moved with practiced casualness, Jeremy chatting with students while Lisa kept watch. Transaction in progress. Edwin's voice came through the comm. Clark is making the handoff. Sarah's voice cut in. All units move in. Take them. But something went wrong. One of Jeremy's student lookouts spotted an agent moving into position. Cops, the student shouted. Jeremy's head snapped up. He grabbed Lisa's arm and melted into the crowd, pushing through families and fairgoers. Targets are moving, an agent reported. Lost visual at Sector 7. Grant watched the chaos unfold, but he remained calm. This was only Phase 1. He had anticipated the possibility of failure. Moving quickly, he made his way to the fair's control booth. The young technician inside looked up in surprise as Grant entered. Security, Grant said, flashing a badge Ray had prepared. We need to make an announcement. The technician nodded, switching on the PA system. Grant took the microphone, his voice booming across the fairgrounds. My name is Grant Hughes, he began, his voice clear and steady. And I have something to say about Lisa Hughes and Jeremy Clark. The crowd fell silent, heads turning toward the speakers. These two individuals have been running a substance distribution operation through the community college. Jeremy Clark, a professor who should be protecting his students, has instead been exploiting them. And my wife, Lisa Hughes, has been using her position at the pharmacy to supply these illegal substances. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Grant continued, laying out the evidence of their crimes, including Lisa's affair and betrayal. In the crowd below, he spotted Lisa and Jeremy frozen in place, their faces masks of shock and rage. But before they could move, FBI agents converged on their position. The aftermath was chaos. News crews arrived, their cameras capturing the arrests. Students who had been part of Jeremy's network came forward, confirming Grant's accusations. Later that evening, Grant faced his hardest task, telling Kevin the truth about his parentage. They sat in Kevin's hospital room, where he was recovering from his transplant. There's something I need to tell you, Grant began, his heart heavy. It's about your mom, and about me. Kevin listened silently as Grant explained about the blood type incompatibility, what it meant, and how he had discovered the truth. Does that mean you're not my real dad? Kevin's voice trembled. Grant knelt beside the bed, looking directly into his son's eyes. Listen to me, Kevin. Biology doesn't make a father. Love does. You're my son, no matter what. Nothing will ever change that. Kevin was quiet for a long moment, then asked, Did you know? Before? No, Grant answered honestly. But it wouldn't have changed anything if I had. You're my son, period. Kevin nodded, tears in his eyes. You're my dad, he said firmly. The only one I want. Meanwhile, Lisa and Jeremy had disappeared into the night, becoming fugitives. They abandoned their phones, their credit cards, anything that could be traced. In a cheap motel room on the outskirts of town, Lisa paced frantically while Jeremy sat on the bed, his head in his hands. He ruined everything. Lisa spat. Our lives, our reputations, everything we built. Jeremy looked up, his eyes dark with hatred. Then we make him pay. How? Lisa demanded. The FBI is looking for us. We can't just walk up and confront him. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Jeremy's face. No, but we can make him come to us. We just need to be smart about it. Lisa stopped pacing, understanding dawning in her eyes. We need to take him out, she said, her voice cold. It's the only way to stop this. Exactly, Jeremy agreed. He thinks he's won. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. They began to plan, drawing on their knowledge of Grant's habits and vulnerabilities. His partial deafness, his predictable routines, his focus on Kevin. All potential weaknesses to exploit. We need to do this right, Jeremy insisted. One chance to make him pay for destroying our lives. Lisa nodded, her eyes burning with hatred. Yes, he'll regret the day he came back from the army. I was happy before he returned. He should have stayed away. As they plotted their revenge, Neither realized that they were playing directly into Grant's hands. He had anticipated their reaction, planned for it. The hunter was about to become the hunted, but not in the way they expected. The stage was set for a final confrontation. Grant's exposure of their crimes had backed them into a corner, and like cornered animals, they were at their most dangerous. But Grant was ready. He had faced worse odds in combat, and this time, he had right on his side. The war was far from over, but the battle lines were drawn. Grant's military training had taught him that the most dangerous moment in any operation was when the enemy felt they had nothing left to lose. Lisa and Jeremy had reached that point, and their desperation made them unpredictable. But Grant had one advantage they didn't. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. He was fighting for Kevin, for justice, and for all the students Jeremy had exploited. That made him dangerous in a different way. The way a father protecting his child is dangerous. The next move would be theirs, but Grant would be ready. The net was tightening, and soon there would be nowhere left for them to run. Chapter 6. The Price of Truth. The hunt for Lisa and Jeremy intensified. Ray worked his contacts, tracking their movements through a network of informants. They had gone to ground, but they couldn't hide forever. They're staying at cheap motels, Ray reported during a strategy meeting. Paying cash, using fake names. But here's the interesting part. They're still using a burner phone. Grant leaned forward. Lisa's old burner? Exactly, Ray grinned. And guess who paid the bill for it all these years? I did, Grant realized. Through our joint account. Lisa never spent her own money if she could avoid it. Ray spread out a map marked with red dots. These are the locations where the phone has been active. They're moving in a pattern, staying one step ahead of the FBI. Grant studied the pattern, his military training helping him see the strategy behind their movements. They're circling back, planning something. My thoughts exactly, Ray agreed. They're not just running, they're hunting. Grant's prediction proved accurate. That night, as he slept in his bedroom, two figures crept through the darkness of his backyard. Lisa knew the house's layout perfectly, including the window with the loose latch that Grant hadn't fixed due to his focus on Kevin's health. Lisa and Jeremy moved silently toward the window. Grant's partial deafness in his left ear made him vulnerable, a fact Lisa intended to exploit. She carried a small bag containing medical supplies from her days at the pharmacy, including a vial of general anesthesia. Remember the plan, Jeremy whispered as they eased the window open. Quick and quiet, they slipped into the house, their footsteps silent on the carpeted floor. Lisa led the way to Grant's bedroom, her familiarity with the house making navigation simple even in the darkness. Grant lay sleeping, unaware of the intruders. Lisa approached with practiced efficiency, the anesthesia mask ready. When she pressed it to his face, Grant's eyes snapped open, but it was too late. The substance took effect quickly, and his struggle lasted only seconds. "Help me with him," Lisa hissed to Jeremy. They bound Grant's hands and blindfolded him before carrying him to their waiting car. The factory, Jeremy directed as they drove away. "My father's old place. No one's been there in years." The abandoned factory stood on the outskirts of town, its hulking shape a dark silhouette against the night sky. They dragged Grant's unconscious form inside, securing him to a chair in the middle of the main floor. As the anesthesia began to wear off, Grant slowly regained consciousness. The first thing he noticed was the musty smell of abandoned machinery and concrete. Then came awareness of the rope binding him to the chair, the blindfold over his eyes. "Welcome back, darling," Lisa's voice dripped with sarcasm. She yanked off his blindfold, allowing him to see her and Jeremy standing before him. "You should have just minded your own business." Lisa's voice rose with anger. "I was happy before you came back." Grant laughed, the sound echoing in the empty factory. "You call that happy? You were living a lie. Did you really think you were going to get away with all of this?" "You're a fool, Grant." Jeremy stepped forward, twirling a crowbar in his hands. "Thinking you could outsmart us. Now you're going to pay the price." As Jeremy approached with the crowbar, Grant remained still, waiting. The ropes around his wrists weren't as tight as they should have been. His captor's amateur mistake. He'd been working them loose since regaining consciousness, using techniques he'd learned in military training. Jeremy raised the crowbar, but before he could strike, Grant made his move. In one fluid motion, he freed his hands and lunged forward, tackling Jeremy. The crowbar clattered across the concrete floor as they grappled. Grant's combat training gave him the advantage. He drove his knee into Jeremy's leg, sending the other man stumbling. Grabbing the fallen crowbar, Grant swung it in a controlled arc, striking Jeremy's leg with enough force to drop him. Lisa screamed in rage and rushed forward, but Grant was ready. He sidestepped her attack, using her momentum to send her sprawling. Through his good ear, Grant heard the approaching sirens. Ray and the FBI had followed his tracking device, the one he'd activated the moment he realized he was being kidnapped. The factory doors burst open, flooding the space with red and blue lights. Ray led the charge, followed by FBI agents with weapons drawn. Federal agents. Freeze. Jeremy and Lisa found themselves surrounded, their amateur kidnapping plot thoroughly outmatched by professional law enforcement. As agents moved in to make the arrests, Grant noticed movement in the shadows, more of Jeremy's associates trying to flee. Grant didn't hesitate. He charged after them, taking down two with quick, efficient moves. "That's what you get for messing with a soldier," he growled, securing them for the FBI. Ray approached as agents led the prisoners away. "You okay, brother?" Grant nodded, rubbing his wrists where the ropes had chafed. "They did exactly what we expected. Amateurs playing at being criminal masterminds. Still, it was a risk," Ray frowned. "They could have killed you." "They could have tried," Grant corrected. "But they underestimated what a father will do to protect his family." As dawn broke over the factory, Grant watched Lisa and Jeremy being loaded into separate FBI vehicles. Their reign of corruption and betrayal was finally over. They had tried to silence him, but instead had sealed their own fates. Kevin was safe at home with Edwin standing guard, unaware of the night's events. Grant intended to keep it that way. His son had been through enough. He didn't need to know how close violence had come to their doorstep. The FBI's evidence technicians swarmed the factory, documenting everything. They found more proof of Jeremy's substance operation, records, phones, and even a small stash of illegal pharmaceuticals. Lisa and Jeremy had brought their entire operation to their hideout, making the FBI's job even easier. Grant stood with Ray, watching the scene unfold. The price of truth had been high: his marriage, his privacy, his sense of security. But as he thought of Kevin, of the students Jeremy had exploited, of the lives Lisa had helped destroy, he knew it had been worth it. The sun rose fully over the factory, marking the end of a long night and the beginning of a new day. Justice had been served, not through courts or legal proceedings, but through the determination of a father who refused to let evil triumph. "Let's go home," Grant said to Ray. "Kevin will be waking up soon." As they drove away from the factory, Grant felt the weight of the past few months lifting from his shoulders. The war was over. He had won. Now he could focus on what really mattered: healing his family and building a better future for his son. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. The morning after Lisa and Jeremy's arrest, Grant's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from reporters. News vans lined his street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. The story had exploded across local stations and was quickly gaining national attention. "Dad, there are people with cameras outside," Kevin said, peering through the living room blinds. Grant placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "Stay away from the windows. They'll get bored and leave eventually." But they didn't leave. The story was too sensational to ignore. A decorated veteran uncovering a substance trafficking ring run by a college professor and his own wife. The headlines grew more dramatic by the hour. "Professor's substance ring exposed by Army vet. Wife's betrayal leads to major substance bust. Local college scandal. Students recruited as dealer." The college campus erupted in chaos. Students who had taken Jeremy's classes gathered in protest, demanding investigations into their grades and academic standing. The administration placed the entire sociology department under review. Grant watched the coverage from his living room, keeping Kevin home from school to shield him from the immediate fallout. The local news showed footage of Jeremy being led into the courthouse for his arraignment, followed by Lisa in handcuffs, her head bowed. The defendants, Jeremy Clark and Lisa Hughes, stand accused of running a sophisticated substance distribution network through Riverside Community College, the reporter announced. Sources say Professor Clark targeted financially vulnerable students. Grant muted the TV as Kevin entered the room. His son's face was pale, his movements uncertain. "They're saying things about Mom at school," Kevin said quietly. Tommy Wilson's older brother had Professor Clark for sociology. He said, "Stop," Grant interrupted gently. "What other people say doesn't matter. We know the truth, and that's enough." But the truth was everywhere, impossible to escape. Lisa's family held a press conference denouncing her actions. Her sister sobbed on camera, expressing shock and disappointment. The pharmaceutical company where Lisa worked launched an internal investigation, their stock prices dropping as investors panicked. The next few weeks brought a parade of law enforcement officials to Grant's door. FBI agents needed additional statements. DEA investigators had questions about Lisa's pharmaceutical connections. Local police wanted details about Jeremy's student recruitment tactics. Kevin struggled to maintain his composure, but Grant noticed the signs of strain. His son's grades began to slip. He stopped talking to his friends. One afternoon, Grant found him sitting alone in his room, staring at an old family photo. "I got called into the counselor's office today," Kevin said without looking up. "Some kids were saying stuff about Mom being a substance dealer, about me being not really your son." Grant sat beside him on the bed. "Listen to me. Those kids don't know anything about us, about what makes a real family. But they're right about one thing, aren't they? Mom is going to jail." Grant nodded slowly. "Yes. She made bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences. Like when you ground me for not doing my homework?" The innocent comparison made Grant's heart ache. "Something like that, but much more serious. That's why I've arranged for you to talk to someone. A therapist who helps kids deal with difficult situations." Kevin's shoulders tensed. "I don't need a shrink. Think of it more like a coach," Grant suggested. "Someone who can help you develop strategies for handling tough times. Just like how Coach Martinez helps you with basketball." The mention of basketball reminded Grant that life had to continue, despite the chaos. He enrolled Kevin in therapy sessions and worked with his teachers to develop a plan for catching up on missed schoolwork. Grant himself struggled with the aftermath of his actions. While the public hailed him as a hero for exposing the illegal substance ring, he questioned the cost of his revenge. The satisfaction he'd expected to feel was hollow, replaced by a deep weariness. One evening, as he sorted through old photos for the FBI, Ray stopped by to check on him. "You did the right thing," Ray said, watching Grant separate pictures into evidence piles. "Those two were poisoning the community. Who knows how many kids they could have hurt." Grant set down a photo of Lisa at their wedding. "I know, but sometimes doing the right thing feels wrong anyway." "That's because you're a good man," Ray replied. "The kind who can't take pleasure in other people's pain, even when they deserve it." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Edwin, looking uncomfortable in a suit and tie. "Just finished my deposition with the DA's office," he explained, loosening his collar. "They want me to testify about my time undercover in Clark's class." Grant studied the young man who had risked so much to help him. "You did good work, Edwin. Above and beyond what I asked for." Edwin's expression brightened. "Actually, that's not why I'm here. I've been thinking about the future, what comes next. I heard about this auto shop for sale on Mason Street." The hint of hope in Edwin's voice sparked something in Grant's mind. A way forward, perhaps. A chance to rebuild from the ashes of his old life. But first, they had to get through the trial. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and spectators on the first day of the trial. Grant led Kevin through the media gauntlet, keeping his son close as cameras flashed around them. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Jeremy and Lisa sat at separate tables with their attorneys, neither acknowledging the other's presence. Grant noticed how different they looked from their previous confident selves. Jeremy's academic polish had deteriorated into nervous tics, while Lisa's clothes had been replaced by a plain suit from the prison commissary. The prosecutor's opening statement laid out the government's case in damning detail. Photos of substance deals on campus, audio recordings of Jeremy recruiting students, bank records showing suspicious deposits, lists of prescriptions Lisa had falsified. Grant took the stand on the second day. The prosecutor led him through his testimony carefully. And when did you first become suspicious of your wife's activities? After I returned home from the army, Grant replied, his voice steady. She was taking calls in secret, acting nervous. What prompted you to investigate further? Grant described discovering he wasn't Kevin's biological father, the overheard phone conversation at the hospital, hiring Ray to dig deeper. As he spoke, he kept his eyes fixed on the jury, avoiding Lisa's gaze. Mr. Hughes, the prosecutor continued, please tell the court about the substance operation you uncovered. Grant detailed everything: the network of student dealers, the pharmaceutical supply chain, the money laundering through the college's scholarship fund. With each revelation, the jury's expressions grew darker. Lisa's attorney tried to paint her as a victim during cross-examination. Isn't it true that you were angry about your wife's affair? That this whole investigation was motivated by revenge? I was angry, Grant admitted, but this went beyond personal betrayal. They were destroying young lives for profit. You did what you did, he added, looking directly at Lisa for the first time. Don't try to sit here and act innocent. Lisa took the stand next, her testimony a performance of tears and regret. She claimed Jeremy had manipulated her, used their old friendship to draw her into his scheme. I was lonely, she sobbed. Grant was always deployed, and Jeremy was there. He said he needed my help to provide financial aid to struggling students. I never meant for things to go so far. The jury's faces remained impassive. They'd seen the evidence, text messages showing Lisa actively participating in the operation, surveillance photos of her delivering illegal substances, bank statements revealing her share of the profits. Jeremy's testimony proved to be his undoing. Attempting to shift blame, he claimed Lisa had masterminded the entire operation. She had access to the pharmaceuticals, he insisted. She knew which students were vulnerable from processing their financial aid applications. I was just trying to help them stay in school. His story fell apart under cross-examination. The prosecutor produced emails showing Jeremy had run similar schemes at 2 other colleges before coming to Riverside. Former students testified about his recruitment tactics, his threats when they tried to quit. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Grant and Kevin waited at home, trying to maintain normal routines despite the tension. Finally, Ray called with news. The verdict was in. They returned to the packed courtroom. The jury foreman stood, papers trembling slightly in his hands. In the matter of State versus Jeremy Clark, on the count of substance trafficking, we find the defendant guilty. The litany of guilty verdicts continued: conspiracy, endangering minors, money laundering. Jeremy slumped in his chair as each charge was read. In the matter of State versus Lisa Hughes, on the count of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, we find the defendant guilty. Lisa's convictions were fewer, but still substantial. She would serve time, though less than Jeremy. As the bailiff led them away, Lisa turned to look at Grant one last time. Her face held a mixture of hatred and remorse, but Grant felt nothing as he met her gaze. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about justice and closure. Grant guided Kevin through the crowd without commenting. The legal battle was over, but the real work of healing was just beginning. Chapter 9. A New Horizon. 6 months after the trial, Grant stood in front of a familiar building, his old garage where Hughes Customs had once thrived. The space had been empty since he sold it to pay for Kevin's transplant. Now, with Edwin beside him, he was ready to start again. The equipment needs updating, Edwin noted, running his hand along a dusty workbench. But the bones are good. Grant nodded. Hughes Customs 2.0 has a nice ring to it. They spent weeks renovating the space, working around Edwin's testimony preparations and Kevin's therapy appointments. Grant found peace in the physical labor, in creating something positive after so much destruction. Kevin helped when he could, showing increasing interest in the mechanical aspects of the work. His therapy sessions were making a difference. He smiled more, talked more, seemed more like his old self. Dr. Martinez says I'm processing my anger in a healthy way, Kevin announced one afternoon as they installed new lighting. She says it's okay to be mad at Mom, but still miss her sometimes. Grant paused in his work. How do you feel about that? Confused, I guess. Like, I hate what she did, but she's still my mom, you know? Kevin fiddled with a wire nut. But you're still my dad. That's the part I'm sure about. The shop's grand reopening drew a surprisingly large crowd. The scandal had made Grant something of a local celebrity, but he was determined to let the quality of their work speak for itself. Edwin proved to be a natural at handling customers, his easy charm complementing Grant's technical expertise. They specialized in custom modifications, building a reputation for innovative designs and meticulous execution. One quiet evening, as they cleaned up after a long day of work, Edwin broached a subject they'd both been avoiding. "Sir, about what happened during the investigation. Getting close to Kevin while I was undercover." "You don't need to explain," Grant interrupted. "You were doing your job, but the connection was real. Kevin needs good people in his life now more than ever." Edwin relaxed slightly. "I meant what I said before. I'll follow you to the end, sir. You and Kevin, you're like family to me now." The months passed, bringing gradual healing. Kevin's grades improved. The shop prospered. Grant found himself looking forward to each day instead of just enduring it. Then came the letter. Grant recognized Lisa's handwriting on the envelope, postmarked from the women's correctional facility. He carried it around for days before finally opening it one night after Kevin had gone to bed. "Dear Grant," it began. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about the choices I made. I know sorry isn't enough, but I am sorry. Not just for the criminal things, but for betraying you, for hurting Kevin." The letter continued for pages, full of explanations and apologies. Grant read it twice, searching his heart for a response. The anger that had driven him for so long had faded, replaced by something closer to pity. He wrote a short reply. "I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine and Kevin's. We need to move forward without carrying the weight of hatred." That weekend, Grant and Kevin worked on their first father-son project car, a classic Mustang that needed complete restoration. As they mapped out their plans, Grant noticed how comfortable Kevin had become in the shop, how confidently he handled the tools. "You're getting pretty good at this," Grant observed. Kevin grinned. "Well, I learned from the best." "Hey, Dad, think maybe when I'm older, this could be Hughes Customs 3.0? "Could be," Grant agreed, feeling a surge of pride and hope. "Could be." Later, watching Kevin chat with customers while Edwin demonstrated a new paint technique, Grant reflected on their journey. They had lost much: trust, innocence, the family they thought they had. But they had gained something too: strength, resilience, and a deeper understanding of what really makes a family. The sun was setting as they locked up the shop, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Kevin chattered about his plans for the Mustang while Edwin added technical suggestions. Grant listened, grateful for these moments of ordinary joy. They had survived the darkness, and now, finally, they were ready to step into the light of a new chapter. Together. Epilogue. 10 years later. The sign outside the industrial complex read, "Hughes Customs International," in bold chrome letters. The building, once a small garage on the edge of town, had expanded into a sprawling facility that housed multiple specialized workshops, a design center, and a showroom featuring award-winning custom vehicles. Grant Hughes, now in his early 50s, stood in his office overlooking the main workshop floor. His hair had grayed at the temples, and faint lines marked the corners of his eyes, but his posture remained military straight. Through the glass wall, he watched his son Kevin, now 24, leading a team meeting at the prototype station. "The Dubai client wants something unique," Kevin was saying, gesturing to the 3D model displayed on the large screen. "I'm thinking we integrate solar panels into the body panels, hidden under the clear coat. Edwin, can your team handle the electrical integration?" Edwin Wilkins, who had risen to become Chief Operations Officer of Hughes Customs, nodded thoughtfully. "We'll need to modify the power distribution system, but it's doable. I'll have Sarah run some simulations." Grant smiled, remembering how far they'd come from those early days of rebuilding the shop. The business had grown beyond their wildest expectations, fueled by Kevin's innovative designs and Edwin's exceptional management skills. They had expanded from custom cars to specialized vehicles for military and civilian applications, earning contracts with government agencies and private collectors worldwide. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Ray Gentry, his old friend and now head of security for Hughes Customs, entered with a tablet in hand. "Got those background checks you wanted on the new hires?" Ray said, settling into a chair. Age had added silver to his beard, but his sharp investigator's instincts remained unchanged. All clean, though one has an interesting connection. Remember Brittany Mercado? Grant's mind flashed back to the young student who had helped expose Jeremy Clark's illegal substance operation. The applicants related to her? Her younger brother. She wrote him a recommendation letter. Ray handed over the tablet. She's doing well, by the way. Running a youth counseling program in California now, helping kids stay away from illegal substances. The mention of the past brought a flood of memories. After the trial, Jeremy Clark had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. He still had 15 years to serve, though Grant had heard rumors that he'd become a model prisoner, teaching GED classes to fellow inmates. Lisa had served 8 years of her 12-year sentence before being released on parole. She'd moved across the country, remarried, and according to Ray's occasional updates, worked at a women's rehabilitation center. She and Kevin had limited contact, birthday cards, occasional phone calls, but the relationship remained distant. Dad. Kevin appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. The engineering team needs your input on the new suspension design. Grant nodded to Ray and followed his son to the development lab. Kevin had grown into a confident young man. His past trauma transformed into determination and empathy. He graduated from engineering school with honors, then earned an MBA while working his way up through various departments at Hughes Customs. The team thinks we can improve stability by 30%, Kevin explained, pulling up technical diagrams. But we need your expertise on the military applications. As they discussed the technical details, Grant noticed a small velvet box poking out of Kevin's jacket pocket. Planning something special? Kevin blushed slightly, touching the pocket. Yeah, I'm asking Maria tonight. Figured after 3 years of dating, it's time. Maria Rodriguez had interned at Hughes Customs while studying mechanical engineering. She and Kevin had bonded over their shared passion for innovative design, their relationship growing naturally from friendship to love. Grant approved. Maria was brilliant, kind, and understood the importance of family. She'll say yes, Grant assured him. Want to use the mountain house for the proposal? Already arranged it with Edwin, Kevin grinned. He's setting up the deck with lights and flowers. Maria thinks we're going up there to test the new night vision system. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the main hall. A delivery man was struggling with an enormous gift basket while Edwin tried to help. It's from the governor's office, Edwin explained as they approached, thanking us for the modified security vehicles we provided for the protection detail. The company's reputation had grown significantly over the years. They developed specialized vehicles for law enforcement, emergency services, and military applications. Their anti-substance trafficking modifications were particularly sought after, a fact that gave Grant a sense of poetic justice. Later that afternoon, Grant visited the company's training center, where Edwin was mentoring a group of veterans transitioning to civilian work. Hughes Customs made a point of hiring former military personnel, providing them with technical training and career opportunities. The skills you learned in service are valuable here, Edwin was saying to the group. Attention to detail, discipline, teamwork. These are the foundations of our success. The training program had been Edwin's idea, inspired by his own experience going from soldier to businessman. Under his guidance, dozens of veterans had found new purpose in civilian life. Grant's phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Rebecca. They'd met 5 years ago at a charity gala where Hughes Customs was sponsoring underprivileged youth in technical education programs. Rebecca, a former military nurse, had immediately understood Grant's complexities and helped him open his heart to love again. Dinner at 7, the text read. Kevin invited Maria's family. Time to celebrate. Grant smiled, replying with a thumbs-up emoji. Rebecca had helped him navigate the challenges of balancing family and business, becoming a supportive stepmother to Kevin and a valuable advisor in their philanthropic initiatives. The Hughes Foundation, established 3 years ago, focused on helping young people avoid illegal substance abuse through education and opportunity. They provided scholarships, apprenticeships, and support services, turning the pain of their past into hope for others' futures. As evening approached, Grant completed his daily ritual, a walk through each department, checking in with employees, observing operations. The facility hummed with activity, 3 shifts working around the clock to meet global demand. In the prototype shop, he found Sarah Chun, their lead electrical engineer, working late on the solar integration project. She joined the company fresh out of MIT, drawn by Kevin's innovative vision and the company's ethical standards. The simulations are promising, she reported, showing him the data. We can achieve 90% efficiency without compromising the aesthetic. Good work, Grant approved. But don't miss dinner. Kevin's getting engaged tonight. Sarah's face lit up. Finally, Maria's been dropping hints for months. The news of Kevin's planned proposal spread quickly through the facility, generating excitement among the close-knit staff. Many had watched Kevin grow from a wounded teenager into the capable leader he'd become. At home that evening, Grant helped Rebecca prepare for the celebration dinner. Their house, while comfortable, maintained the military orderliness he preferred. Photos lined the walls: Kevin's graduation, the company's expansion ceremonies, family vacations, Edwin's wedding to his college sweetheart. "The ring is beautiful," Rebecca commented, arranging flowers. "Kevin showed me last week. Maria will love it. He's come so far," Grant mused, remembering the scared boy who'd faced so many betrayals. "They both have." The doorbell rang, announcing Maria's family's arrival. Her father, a retired police detective, had become good friends with Grant, bonding over their shared values and love of classic cars. As Grant welcomed them, his phone buzzed with a message from Edwin: "Setup complete at Mountain House. Champagne chilling. Good luck to the kid." The evening unfolded perfectly. Kevin and Maria left for their testing mission after dinner, while the families waited for news. 2 hours later, Kevin's text arrived, a photo of Maria's hand wearing the ring, backed by the twinkling lights Edwin had arranged on the deck. Later that night, after the celebrations had ended and their guests had departed, Grant sat in his study reviewing old photos. He found one from the early days of Hughes Customs 2.0, Kevin and Edwin working on their first restoration project, both so young and uncertain. Another photo showed Ray teaching Kevin surveillance techniques for security purposes, though really it was about building the boy's confidence. Then there was Edwin's graduation from business school, Kevin's first patent application, the groundbreaking ceremony for the new facility. The photos told a story of healing and growth, of broken trust rebuilt into something stronger. The pain of Lisa's betrayal had faded, transformed into wisdom that helped them avoid similar wounds and heal others who had been hurt. Grant's phone lit up with one final message for the night. From Kevin: "Thanks, Dad, for everything. Love you." Simple words, but they carried the weight of their shared journey. From the ashes of betrayal, they had built not just a successful business, but a true family, bound by choice rather than blood. The next morning, Grant arrived early at the facility, watching the sunrise paint the Hughes Customs International sign in golden light. Employee cars began filling the parking lot, veterans finding new purpose, young engineers pursuing innovation, office staff keeping operations smooth. Kevin arrived with Maria, both glowing with happiness. Edwin followed shortly after, carrying blueprints for their next big project. Ray appeared with his daily security briefing, and Sarah rushed in with breakthrough news about the solar integration. Grant observed it all from his office, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. They had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into strength, and loss into legacy. The future stretched bright before them, filled with possibilities they would explore together. As he joined his team for the morning briefing, Grant reflected on the twists and turns that had led them here. The Army sergeant who had returned home to betrayal could never have imagined this future. But through determination, loyalty, and love, they had built something remarkable. The past could not be changed, but it had shaped them into who they were meant to become. And as Grant looked at the faces around the conference table, his son, his friends, his chosen family, he knew that sometimes the worst betrayals could lead to the greatest blessings. The meeting began, and with it, another day of moving forward, innovating, growing, and most importantly, being there for each other. The Hughes legacy would continue, not defined by the betrayals of the past, but by the bonds they had forged in overcoming them. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.